Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
And I'm Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know the government has recovered non-human technology.
Or at least we will, if Congress puts the UAP Disclosure Act back in the budget this year.
It raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely, but even if it's new science and not aliens, woo.
It's a very exciting time. And very exciting, I got to wear my new shirt today.
Yeah. That's perfect.
This is, if anybody's interested, this is sold by Tom DeLonge's company, To the Stars. I literally just occurred to me the other day, like, I bet he has a UFO shirt, and he totally does. So now I got my UFOs are real shirt.
I assume you'll be putting that link in the show notes.
That's a great idea. I should.
All right. Well, and speaking of, supporting UFOs, I don't know what we're talking about anymore. Quick reminder, we do have a Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime and a website, veryexcitingtime.com. You all know that. We're getting close to our 30 Patreon marker, where I start... I've started looking at like, okay, how am I really going to put this Discord together? So we are getting close. You don't have to be a paying member. There are now free members in Patreon. So if you just want to be part of that and push us towards the goal, please do. A payment in excitement and energy is actually hugely valuable for us. So don't think that isn't valuable.
I mean, don't get us wrong. The money's nice too, but
I mean, the money's great. Yeah, there's so many things like what we were talking about last time. Was it a green screen, or we were going to get you something for the podcast?
And the green screen is really tricky because I'm oriented kind of diagonally in my room, so it would need to be one of those like pop-up projector screen kind. It has to kind of like sit above my bed. I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah, it would be. Well, anyways, we think about these things every once in a while, and it's like, well, yeah, that'd be great, but we don't actually have money for that. So
yeah.
Anyways, so another thing, I've got a retainer in, so apologies if I sound a little bit weird. We're also dealing with some like sound editing issues that we're trying to figure out. Our last one that went out, Scott clipped a lot, and we're trying to figure out what's going on there, but we have not licked that particular problem. Licked is a very weird phrase.
Very weird. Anyway. You just have an oral fixation right now after you're recovering from your gum surgery?
I do. Yeah, that's really true. But yeah, anyways, it went well. I'm doing better, healing well. So should we get started?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So I was thinking the other day, Scott, and I can't believe I'm asking this, but so interestingly, Scott put this line in the script, but it is actually true. I have been wondering what the hell is going on with Congress, because we just haven't heard anything about it. It's been like stories and stuff, which is fun. But what in the world is going on there?
No, it's true. We went through a period of time where we were talking about congressional stuff like every other week. And then, we had some kind of news and we responded to that, and we did some classic stories. But yeah, we haven't talked about Congress because we've been in kind of a weird lull with Congress, congressional news lately. That said, I do have some stuff to talk about today, including possible UFO amendments in the NDAA and rumors of upcoming UAP hearings.
Hey, all right, great. Let's dig into it.
So up first, I got just a couple of like loose comments about UFOs from senators and Congress people that aren't really tied to any bigger story. up first, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, UFO Mama Bear herself, was asked about the Arrow historical report. And they were asked, like, yo, like, so is this it? Is, like, case closed? And she said, oh, it's definitely not case closed. I think that their report was just their analysis of everything they were shown and everyone they talked to, because they had no basis to say there's a secret program. But of note, the 2 whistleblowers that I've met with did not meet with Arrow and refused to meet with Arrow.
This is really telling. So, like, Gillibrand was super on board with Arrow, enough that we called her hashtag UFO Mama Bear. But I really feel like that even then she was asking, like, very pointed questions, like, do you have the resources you need? Because I think even then she was starting to see these little hints that Arrow was not doing the thing that they were supposed to do. And she was trying to figure out, is it because of you, or is it because you're being shackled or hobbled? And this last quote from her makes it feel like maybe it's you.
Yeah,
maybe it's
she's
Arrow.
got a little bit of doubts as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I should note, Gillibrand has had several interviews lately, and she's been thoroughly, like, middle of the road about all this UFO stuff. Very non-committal. We set up this program. They're looking into stuff. It's great. She seems to kind of think that's the end of it. Notably, someone asked her about Schumer's UAP Disclosure Act last year, and she was like, that passed, didn't it? I thought he got everything he wanted. Like, no. She's not, like, as plugged into this as I got the impression of early on. But that's fine. Yeah. We don't need everybody to be plugged in. As long as they're not actively sabotaging it. Honestly, like, the bar's real low for what I want out of Congress people at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's so much that goes across that at their desks. Like, it would be impossible to know. And I can totally see something getting gutted and people not even knowing because it just didn't come up in their briefing or they forgot. So
absolutely. Now, speaking of briefings, we've got a quote here from Representative Eric Burleson, who's a member of the UAP caucus, along with Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna. He says, we need to call on Arrow to declassify that same report that they gave to Congress. Some of the images they're saying are top secret because of the technology that collected the images, but the content should be made public. I think that Arrow is not done. They still have some stuff to do. And I don't think our job should be done either. And at the end of the day, we still have dark programs that are spending money that we don't have an answer for. Because that's been the interesting thing with Arrow. They've been like, look, we answered the questions on these like 500 that we can identify. And it's like, no one cares about those.
Right? Like, stop wasting time with the ones that are identifiable. We get it. There's stuff there, but put aside the balloons and the drones and let's get into the weird stuff and like let's at least talk about it and
absolutely
and get it out there.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the thing like we've always said, MUFON and various other organizations have at times said that something like 90 to 95% of UFO reports are identifiable. Totally. I get it. Humans are fallible creatures. We see lights in the sky. They do weird things. We get excited. But there's some genuinely anomalous stuff in here. And when we dismiss it, when we throw the baby out with the bathwater, we're missing the point of the conversation.
Right. Yeah. Like I want to see those ones that have been left over like so desperately. And the fact 100%. That they can't declassify that or anything is very frustrating.
Yeah. Now, I've got an excellent series of quotes here from AOC. She was doing a TikTok, Instagram, I don't know where it was, but she was doing one of those vertical format stories, and she was talking about UAP stuff. She said, so let me start off this whole UAP discussion by just stating the obvious, which is a lot of people don't trust the government. And why would you? I mean, a lot of our budget is like 5 defense contractors in a trench coat asking for $1 trillion. So, when you don't have universal health care, but you spend $800 billion a year and can't pass an audit, I don't trust it either.
Oh my God. 5 defense contractors in a trench coat. I love AOC so much right now. That is
She's
so
good.
perfect.
Yeah. She says, so what do I think? Do I think UAPs are real? Well, UAP stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. Do I believe there are phenomena that have been identified by pilots, commercial, military, etc., that have gone unidentified? Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We've heard from some pretty credible witnesses. Do I think those are aliens? That's a different question.
Yeah. It's an important distinction. Does she mention which witnesses those are?
I'm cutting out quite a bit here. It is clear through context clues that she is talking about David Fravor and Ryan Graves, the Navy pilots who testified with David Grush at the UAP hearing. Now, here's my favorite. She goes on with kind of pursuing, like, why am I personally investigating UAP stuff? She says, I do think that there is something going on. I know that in the past we have dragged defense contractors before the committee, and I've questioned them, and we have found defense contractors hiding things. And one line of questioning that I had resulted in tens of millions of dollars just from one smaller contractor alone getting returned to the public because of corrupt practices. We have truly documented incidents of defense contractors being shady. Do I think there are grounds to pull on that thread further? Yeah, I do. And I think it should be pulled further. Do I know what it is? No. Am I going to be a hater? No. But I'm always interested in corruption and cover-ups. That's my thing.
That's beautiful. I like that she's pretty clear. She's not on board with aliens, but is ready to go to the mat believing that defense contractors are pulling a fast one, because that just really resonates with me. It just seems so likely.
Absolutely. Right. And, as much as I do believe there are aliens, I don't blame anyone else for being more skeptical about it. But we have to be able to talk about what's actually happening, which is there are weird things flying around in our sky, and the military is being cagey as hell about it. Maybe those two things are unrelated. I don't know, but they're both worth digging into. And I love that AOC is like, I kind of don't care about that. I'm interested in it, but I absolutely believe the government is lying to us and defense contractors are stealing from us. And I'm going to be a bulldog about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've long thought that was what this whole thing was about to begin with. So
yeah, I mean, there is definitely a world where you can believe that there is nothing paranormal or non-human here. This is all just weird, secret, black books projects that have gone off the rails and over budget. Yeah, 100%. I don't fault anyone who believes that. I think there's enough evidence to suggest there's more to it. But that is certainly, if you're going Occam's razor, it's easier to believe the government's doing something sketchy than aliens. Right. I get it.
Yeah. And I think you mean Hanlon's razor, because how many projects have you and I been on that went off the rails and just lost a bunch of money? Like, yeah, of course this happens at the government scale.
Hanlon's razor is the never ascribed to malice what could be ascribed to incompetence.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I bet that. Okay. Actually, sorry, let me follow up on this for a second. I wasn't going to talk about this because it's not a quote, but I was just listening. I was getting caught up on Kelly Chase's excellent UFO Rabbit Hole podcast. And she has an episode about like secret state and black budgets that is tip top, highly recommended. Yeah. And in it, she addresses a common complaint about UFOs that I have heard. And in fact, I've heard it from my dad. My dad worked at the State of Oregon Department of Environmental Quality for something like 30 or 40 years. And he was in the military before that. And he was fond of saying, like, the government is pathologically incapable of keeping secrets. And I know this as someone who works in the government. But the thing is, and a lot of people believe this, it's just factually untrue. I knew about the Manhattan Project, for example, or thought I did. The Manhattan Project, right? We got Enrico Fermi and Oppenheimer and Einstein working at a lab out in the desert somewhere, and they made a bomb in secret. Okay. That was my understanding. They kept that secret. It was like one building. No. Famously, I think it was Niels Bohr said, the only way that we're going to be able to make a weapon out of nuclear power is to turn the entire United States into a munitions factory. And the thing is, they kind of did. There were facilities for the Manhattan Project spread across the continental U.S., all siloed and stovepiped, all doing one part of it, none aware of the big picture. There were very few people who had the big picture. And at its peak, I want to say it was something like 130,000 people working in Project Manhattan.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling to me. That's much bigger than I had pictured in my head. Now, of course, it's easy to kind of brush that off like, well, yeah, but, you know, it was the war and people in the 40s were kind of like weirdly patriotic about it and didn't question the government. It's a different world now. Now you couldn't do that. The other example she goes to is Area 51. Again, I thought I knew the history of Area 51, top secret, you know, base where we did test programs out of. We found out about it through Bob Lazar and George Knapp in the 90s, yada, yada, yada. No. The only reason that we know about it today is because they declassified some papers about the development of the U-2 in the 2000s. It was during Obama's presidency that it finally was admitted this was real. There were two major points before that where it was outed. One was, obviously, notably, Bob Lazar. Now, Bob Lazar came out, and the government kind of rightly perceived, we can just say this guy's insane and not worry about it. Like, yeah, he's talking about our secret base, but like, no such base exists. That's the party line. We all know there's a base out there, but like, everybody kind of gets it. But on that base, they were doing, now let's completely take UFOs out of it. This is a top secret Air Force research facility. On that base, they have garbage to dispose of, like anywhere else.
Sure.
The way they dispose of that garbage on a top secret base, you can't just send it to a landfill. They dig this giant burn pit, like the size of a football stadium, and they throw everything in there, cover it with jet fuel, and just torch it. And because they've got this facility built, the other Air Force bases in the area start sending their shit there. So they've basically got a burn pit going 24 hours a day with this toxic smoke pouring out of it of, you know, weird experimental fuels, you know, whatever you're developing at a facility like this.
Right. Yeah.
The reason we know about this is because a group of steelworker contractors were being flown out to the base to work on base and build facilities. And, you know, they tell stories about like, yeah, you know, we had to look straight ahead and not look at everything. You'd hear a roaring, something's about to fly overhead. And the guards that were with us told us all to look at the ground. You know, like you just learned like to keep your eyes on your job and not think about it. But they would regularly be directly downwind and covered in this thick black smoke. And one of the guys like gets severe cancer. He's got this crazy skin condition. A bunch of dudes die, and they eventually file a class action lawsuit. The government says you can't file a lawsuit because this base doesn't exist. So they go and prove it exists. They find all this paperwork, you know, like pay stubs. Somebody found a security manual for working on Area 51, and they go to the judge and say, here it is. It exists. And the judge goes to I forget exactly what happened. Anyway, long story short, it ends up at the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court agrees with the Air Force that you can't disclose that this base exists for operational security. Therefore, the lawsuit can't continue. These poor dudes got horrifically mistreated on this base and had severe health problems, and the government just said no. And then quietly in 2013 or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, that place is real. So that's one of those things I want to hear on, like, okay, yeah, we kind of knew that Area 51 existed, but the party line, officially, it did not exist, to the point where they were willing to let people suffer rather than break the seal on this secret. So to anybody who's like, oh, the government cannot keep a secret, the government can and does actively keep secrets up to the present day. About
absolutely.
Like, we only know about this one because of a FOIA request years later. So anyway, sorry, that was a weird tangent. But like I said, Kelly Chase, UFO Rabbit Hole. I forget what the episode title is. I'll put it in the show notes. It's like Black Budgets, something like that. But totally worth listening to. Very good.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Oh, yeah.
Rabbit holes is bad.
The big thing we're talking about today is the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which is basically the budget for the military. And because the budget for the military is basically guaranteed to pass every year, it's also a political magnet. It's real easy to hang your amendment off of it, and it'll probably get passed. But everybody knows that's the game now. So the NDAA is this big, weird, complicated political thing, not over whether or not it will pass, but over what will or won't be included. And famously, for the last several years, some UAP legislation has been included in it. The creation of ARROW was mandated in a previous year's NDAA. Whistleblower protections, stuff like that. So this year's NDAA is coming out, and famously, last year's NDAA included Chuck Schumer and Mike Round's UAP Disclosure Act, which was going to be a real big deal, and it included a couple of holy shit parts in it, like one of which was the phrase eminent domain with regards to non-human technology. If anybody has non-human technology, the government just gets to take it, full stop. Which was widely read as, if Lockheed Martin is sitting on a UAP that the CIA gave them in the 40s and they don't want to give it back, the government's like, F you, hand it over. There was also some pushback on that from, notably, Skinwalker Ranch owner Brandon Fugel, who's like,
really?
What do you mean? You don't get to just come take the UFO off my land. I'm kind of doing something with this, which is a little disappointing, but whatever. And then the other thing was they were going to set up a JFK-style disclosure process where there's a mandatory expectation that UFO files will be disclassified, and they're setting up a presidential review board who's in charge of setting a timeline for this, and only under very extreme circumstances is the president and the review board able to recommend that these documents stay classified. Now, who knows what would have come of it, but it was very strong language. Long story short, the UAP Disclosure Act did pass, but it was completely gutted. They stripped out the eminent domain, and they stripped out the Presidential Review Board, which means there is a law on books that says every government agency and department must turn over their UFO files to the, I forget who, the like central bureaucracy who are in charge of releasing it. But it was left undefined what exactly qualifies as those files, what exactly the timeline is, and there's no teeth to enforce it even if someone did disagree. So
excellent work.
Very disappointing. So everybody's kind of hoping this year that's going to get back in.
So brief aside, I just want to mention for other viewers, this is not how eminent domain works. it's really fucking complicated to actually use eminent domain. Like the city has eminent domain over all of our houses right now, but they don't often like repossess houses that way because it's real fucking complicated. Like politically, it is extremely challenging. So
I believe you.
I just want to like point that out. And they might already have it anyways.
You may be right. All I know is it was widely reported that was the main sticking point, and there was a big pushback from the intelligence community, especially about the eminent domain part, which frankly is kind of sus. Like if we're yo, the intelligence community is keeping secrets from us. They've been running crash retrieval programs and they've got UFOs. Well, okay, we're passing a law saying you have to give them back. And they're like, no. What do you mean, no? I thought you said you didn't have any. We don't, but you can't have them.
Like, really? Yeah, I don't know. Whatever.
Right,
anyways,
so
NDAA.
Let's get into the weeds a little bit. The NDAA is actually made up of two related bills, confusingly.
Okay.
The NDAA itself, which is the military side of it, and the IAA, which is the Intelligence Authorization Act, which is same thing, but for the intelligence community. So for both of these, both the Senate and the House pass their own version of it, and then it all goes into reconciliation. So starting with the IAA, the Senate version was approved on May 22nd. The Senate approved version of the IAA included several UAP provisions.
Nice. Okay, great. That's exciting to hear.
According to Douglas Dean Johnson, he said the first provision would extend a law originally enacted in December 2023 to deny funding to any UAP-related controlled access program within the intelligence community that has not been properly reported to designated members of Congress.
I don't understand this. Because isn't that already illegal to run a controlled access program that isn't reported properly to Congress, UAP or not?
Yeah, it's a very weird thing. But what it boils down to is Congress clearly believes that it is being lied to based on testimony from David Grush and others. So this was passing an explicit law that even your off-the-books programs aren't allowed to do this. And I agree, it is a very strange law, but I think it is almost meant more as a message than an actual, like, intending to enforce anything.
Is this like when we changed the A from aerial to anomalous?
It kind of feels like that, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, you said aerial, unidentified aerial phenomena, and these ones are in space. Space doesn't have any air, so they're not aerial.
What about underwater? I don't have to report that. That's a USO.
Right. So, according to The Hill, key members of Congress delivered an astounding rebuke to the Pentagon's UFO Analysis Office last week, doubling down on whistleblower allegations of secret U.S. government UFO programs. Despite Arrow's sweeping denials of secret unreported UFO activities, the Senate Intelligence Committee clearly believes that such programs do indeed exist.
Okay. So this is about calling the DoD's bluff and making I don't know, does it make the penalties bigger or more explicit?
Apparently it was something that was going to expire, so it is extending it. And
okay.
The reason I think people are viewing it as a rebuke is when they set this up a few years ago, Arrow hadn't really gotten spun up, and they were still kind of saying like, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe there's stuff out there. We'll give it a good look. We'll give it the old college try. And then they came out with the historical report like, nothing to see here, guys. We went and knocked. We asked everyone if they were a secret UFO program. They all said no. This is Congress saying, no, we don't believe you. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The second provision would enhance protection for intelligence community whistleblowers, sponsored by Democrat Senator Wyden from Oregon.
Hey, Wyden, that's your guy.
That is my guy. I love Senator Wyden. He's always attached to this stuff. I'm like, yeah, man, that's right. Again, according to The Hill, the whistleblower provisions appear crafted to encourage additional UFO whistleblowers to come forward, largely by mitigating the conditions that led to the vicious reprisals that Grush alleges he endured.
Yeah, I hadn't pegged Wyden as being a UFO guy, but yeah, it's interesting.
No, you're totally right. We have not heard about him associated with any UFO stuff. The Hill goes on to say, Wyden has not associated these whistleblower provisions with UAP specifically, but some of the proposed changes conceivably could have application to intelligence community employees who believe that they have UAP-related information.
Okay. So it's not about UFOs or UAP. It's about intelligence community whistleblower protections. That I love it.
Well, Wyden adds several protections to whistleblowers, allowing whistleblower complaints to be provided directly to Congress if sending the complaint to the whistleblower's agency, as is currently required, would compromise the anonymity of the whistleblower or result in the complaint being delivered to the subject of the complaint. It also ensures that whistleblowers cannot have their security clearances revoked on a pretext, and prohibits, as an act of reprisal, public disclosure of whistleblower identities, as well as orders to undertake psychological examinations.
Well, sheesh, those sound exactly like Grush, don't they?
They sure do. Now, do I think that Senator Wyden is a closet UFO guy? I don't know. Maybe he's from Oregon. We're weird out here. But
yeah,
more to the point, I think probably word about Grush is happening in Congress. People are talking about it. And if nothing else, I think Wyden is the kind of guy who goes, okay, look, I don't know if he's right about that stuff, but you're telling me an intelligence community whistleblower tried to complain properly. The complaint went to his boss, who outed him, revoked his security clearance, and said he was crazy. We can do something about that. That shouldn't be a thing that's allowed to happen.
Absolutely. It's frustrating that happened in the first place. So I'm on board.
Yeah.
Let's go Wyden.
A third provision of the Senate IAA would require the Comptroller General to conduct a review of the operations of the Pentagon's UFO office, AARO.
Okay, so I'm not, poli-sci major. What is a Comptroller General?
And just to be clear here, I'm quoting something because I didn't know either. The Comptroller General is the head of the Government Accountability Office, which is an arm of Congress, not part of the executive branch.
So this is Congress investigating AARO. I like that.
Yeah, and this is something that, like, in school, we learned that the military was part of the executive branch, but I never really thought about what that meant. This is where it comes in. When the only mechanisms for investigating and policing the military are themselves part of the executive wing, it raises questions of accountability. And case in point, we asked AARO to investigate the military to see if the military was doing something wrong, but AARO is part of the military. So this doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is a big deal. It's Congress investigating. Liberation Times says, we understand that the Senate Intelligence Committee has lost confidence in AARO's ability to fulfill its responsibilities. This lack of confidence has persisted among some members since last year, which led to the introduction of the Senate's UAP Disclosure Act in 2023, which proposed an independent review board as the primary entity for UAP disclosure.
Yeah. Lost confidence in AARO. Welcome to the club, Congress.
Right. According to The Hill, quote, this formal review by Congress's in-house investigative agency is a stark demonstration of the Senate Intelligence Committee's lack of confidence in AARO. Key senators, in short, believe that the Pentagon's UFO office is either not being truthful with the American public or is not executing its mission effectively.
Yeah, that sounds right. I always wonder, like, if Senate or Congress are too close to the action to see what feels obvious to outsiders like us. But it's good to see that this isn't being lost on them. The forest isn't being lost for the trees,
Absolutely. Okay, so that was the Senate version of the IAA. We're off to a great start. Feeling
great.
Good.
Yeah, I'm excited.
The House version was approved on June 12th, according to Douglas Dean Johnson. The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on June 12th approved its version of the IAA with no UAP specific language.
Yeah. All right. That unsurprising. Where's the UAP caucus? Where's Burchett and Luna?
Don't worry. They're working on the NDAA. We're going to hear from them in a few minutes.
Okay. All right, great.
The HPSCI approved bill does contain whistleblower provisions. Quote, The committee is focused on ensuring intelligence community employees can communicate their concerns to the Congressional Intelligence Committees through the Inspectors General. This year, the committee has included a number of provisions to improve the whistleblower process, including enabling former IC employees to make better use of the urgent concern process.
Is that the same as Wyden's provisions, or I don't know?
Completely unclear, but presumably that'll be dealt with when it goes to reconciliation. They'll put it all together, and either the Venn diagram is very different and they choose which parts to keep, or they're practically the same and it's easy. But interesting to hear that both the Senate and the House are like, yo, this is messed up, we got to get some whistleblower protections in here.
Good.
And they're talking about the intelligence community, but I can't help but wonder if Boeing brought this top of mind.
What?
We saw 2 Boeing whistleblowers die back to back after testifying. Now, I'm not saying Boeing is offing people, but I'm saying there was a lot of conversation in the wind about whistleblowers turning up dead. And, so I wonder if that just kind of brought things to a head in Congress. Maybe not, though. Let's talk about the NDAA now, the National Defense Authorization Act. So before we dive into what the Senate and the House did, let's talk specifically about the UAP Disclosure Act, Round 2.
Okay.
So Senator Mike Rounds, who co-sponsored the bill along with Senator Schumer, has twice confirmed that they are still discussing reintroducing it. Quote, tweaks. We're making tweaks. I can't talk much more about it than that, but there is some work being done.
Okay.
Oh, and I put in a bit here about it getting gutted, but we already talked about that.
Yeah.
Representative Matt Gaetz asked about UAP in the NDAA, said, I would like to see the provisions that did not survive conference last time survive conference this time.
Yeah, me too. Let's go.
Gary Nolan, our favorite scientist, co-founder of the Soul Foundation, said, the UAPDA is being rediscussed and it's being rewritten to address last year's problems. Just because the opposition won one battle doesn't mean that the war is over. I'm quite positive about what the outcome is going to be. If not this year, if not next year, then the year after.
Gary always does a good job keeping hope for hope.
Well, and it kind of gets back to what Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon have been saying the whole time, right? This is not a battle we're going to win in 1 year, in one season. If you care about this, go get a hobby and check back in 5 years. He said that 5 years ago. And if you look at over 5 years, we've made significant progress. It's really incredible. But it's also, like you said, easy to get disheartened by momentary setbacks. And it is going to be a struggle. So being able to kind of take a breath and remind yourself, we are making progress, even if it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Right. There's a saying that I'm going to get it totally wrong, but it was a city planner's highest goal is to plant trees that they'll never sit under.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. It's like we may not do this for us. Everything takes a while, especially like city planning, but I have to imagine the same thing feels true in Congress.
Yeah. Yeah. Matthew Pines, who's a guy we've quoted quite a few times, a security advisor for Sentinel-1, he said, reading the tea leaves and making an informed supposition, the political stakes seem to be coming to a head with the soon-to-be reintroduced Schumer-Rounds UAP Disclosure Act.
Yeah, what does that mean?
He's just saying, like everybody else, that he believes that it's about to get introduced, but he's being careful to say, I don't know it. That's what I'm reading between the lines. Now, the reason I included this quote, because it's not particularly overwhelming by itself, is he got a reply from another guy we've quoted before, an aerospace engineer named Condor Man, who said, I can concur there is a loud buzz about this subject with aerospace contractors.
That's interesting. So, like, what kind of buzz? Is it positive, negative?
Well, he doesn't say. But adding a bit of flavor, a reply to Condor Man was another guy. He said, fellow employee of a major aerospace contractor here, and yes, a significant number of my peers are now tuned into this issue. These are not conspiracy-minded people.
Ha! Aerospace nerds unite.
Yeah. So the reason I think this is interesting, because again, right, like I don't know if these guys have any particular insight, but aerospace nerds don't tend to be conspiracy theorists. You tend to be more kind of science driven, a little more like show me the proof. Right. If there's a considerable contingency of these guys who have some access to top secret, cutting edge aerospace tech, and they think there's something to it, I'm just saying.
Yeah. It's funny, we say nuts and bolts, but it occurred to me when talking about aerospace, like, I don't know how prevalent nuts and bolts are. Like rivets and welds.
Yeah. Rivets and welds, yeah. So there are some other UFO amendments in the wind. You asked about Tim Burchett earlier. Representative Tim Burchett introduced a new bill, the UAP Transparency Act, which would require the president to direct the heads of each federal department to declassify all UAP documents.
Okay. This sounds like it had to be like a very thorough, long document, right?
Mm-hmm. You'd think so, right? Nope, it's less than 2 pages long.
Okay, awesome.
To quote Burchett, the UAP Transparency Act is only 1.5 pages long because it's simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just declassify the files. They spend all this time telling us they don't exist, then release the files, dagnabbit.
All right. Okay. I think laws are complicated for a reason, Tim, but props for using the word dagnabbit. I need to work that in my speech from now on.
Yeah, for sure. Joshua White, a policy consultant, tweeted, "This is what you might call a press release bill. You know it won't pass. It won't even get a vote. But you put it out there and you get a Fox News hit out of it. It's drive-by legislating."
Okay, got it. Sounds like maybe trying to shift the Overton window a little bit so UAP feels more reasonable or something. I don't know. Like,
maybe.
Well, you won't declassify everything about UAP. Maybe just all the specific stuff that we've been working on for a while.
Yeah, and the same thing happened last year, right? Schumer put up the UAPDA, which is very heavily researched and defended and carefully articulated. And Burchett put up this like almost joke of an amendment that was just like, everybody has to tell me what they're doing. And everybody was like, this is not a practical law, Tim. So this feels like the same thing. To me, it feels less like, okay, well, if you won't tell us all that stuff, just tell me this stuff. It feels like going bigger. Like, okay, well, if you won't release in a carefully disclosed, structured manner, then just open the doors and put everything out. It's like asking for $1 and getting turned down and asking for 20. Like it's
right.
No.
Yeah.
So who knows? But that's Burchett's take on it.
Straight to catastrophic.
Right. Now, Ryan Graves, who we know and love, a Navy pilot, who is currently running an advocacy group about UFOs and military pilots, says, I am happy to report that the Safe Aerospace for Americans Act has been proposed as an amendment to the 2025 NDAA. This legislation will require the FAA to accept UAP reports and protect pilots from retribution for reporting, something our witnesses are often really requesting.
That's awesome. So, like, I wish the Wyden amendments applied to people outside the intelligence community. Like, those really should be true for everyone.
Yeah. And thankfully, we've got Ryan Graves advocating for that. And then lastly, we've got Representative Robert Garcia, who said, I am offering 3 UAP amendments for the National Defense Authorization Act. We must continue to responsibly push for safe reporting of UAPs and bring that transparency to the public. This is critical for our national security. My first amendment creates a UAP reporting mechanism for civilian pilots. So that's the Ryan Graves one. My second amendment includes UAP disclosure provisions from last year that were blocked, including a UAP records review board. This is literally reintroducing the full text of the UAP Disclosure Act, which kudos. And my final amendment ensures that Aero has access to covert intel for investigations.
All right. Well, I mean, that sounds pretty good. Let me just take a big sip of water while you tell me what Congress included.
Sure. Yeah. Now, the House version was approved on June. That joke fell flat immediately. The House version was approved on June 14th, but unfortunately, the House Rules Committee did not include any of the UAP related amendments for floor votes.
Why, dag nabbit.
There you go. Representative Garcia said, my 3 UAP amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act have been blocked from being considered by House Republican leadership. We must continue to fight for transparency and take seriously national security concerns and the public interest. We will continue pushing.
I imagine myself like rocking quietly in the corner. Just remember what Gary said. Just remember what Gary said.
That's right. If not this year, it'll be next year. If not next year, it'll be the year after that. D. Dean Johnson added a note on this. He said, it's important to note that rejection by the House Rules Committee will have no direct effect on the possibility of some version of the UAPDA being included in the Senate's forthcoming version of the NDAA.
Okay, yeah. Come on, Senate, let's go.
All right. The Senate version of the NDAA is in progress. The Senate Armed Services Committee sent their version of the NDAA to the Senate floor for consideration, and it also does not include any UAP legislation.
Dag nabbit.
Now, UAP Disclosure Fund notes, new amendments can still be introduced on the floor, as was done for UAP legislation in July of 2023.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that that the original disclosure stuff was an amendment. Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I forgot that too. D. Dean Johnson again saying, if any senator intends to attempt to add a version of the UAPDA to this year's NDAA, which I do not know, I would expect it to occur through negotiations over packages of amendments when the bill comes to the Senate floor, the timing of which is as yet uncertain. That is the route by which the UAPDA cleared the Senate in July of 2023, although it was later gutted in conference with the House of Representatives, mainly due to opposition from the Pentagon.
Okay, so there's still room for hope, but unsurprising that the Pentagon wanted that gutted.
Yeah, and I forget who said it, but someone was saying, like, this is more procedural than anything else. It's like everybody knows the military funding is going to pass. There's no world where the NDAA does not pass. So the core version coming from the Armed Services Committee is that. And then it's up to the senators to add amendments when it's on the floor. So it ain't over, but definitely we've had a few like worrying signs.
Yeah, I mean, it's unsurprising. But yeah, let's let the haggling begin.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's next for the NDAA and IAA. The UAP caucus notes that, quote, while none of the UAP amendments made it to the floor in the House, this is more procedural than pushback. Oh, that's the quote I just said.
There we go.
The Senate is finalizing its version with crucial UAP-related elements like the GAO review of ARROW, defunding unreported UAP programs, and a revised version of the UAPDA, among others possibly. So stay tuned as the battle moves to the conference committee.
Okay. So you've mentioned conference and a couple times. What is the conference committee?
Sure. According to D. Dean Johnson, in many years, but not all, the Intelligence Authorization Act, IAA, is merged with the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, at a later stage in the legislative process. When this is done, the House of Representatives and the Senate vote on a merged NDAA IAA, and the two measures are sent to the president as a single bill.
Okay. You know, I'm starting to think UAP may not be a top political agenda at the moment. I mean, is there some other politics that's like taking everyone's attention right now?
I don't know. It's really weird. What could be more important? You know what it probably is? I bet they're all worrying about the UAP hearings. We've been hearing rumors that they're working. That's got to be it.
I bet that's it. They're all just working on that. Okay.
So yeah, we've been hearing rumors for months and months now that there were going to be more UAP public hearings this year. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand said, quote, I let interim ARROW Director Phillips know that I would like to have a public hearing in the Senate this summer. I'm hoping for July. So he's going to put together some data and information to disclose at a public hearing to show what work they've done, especially examples of things that were unknown that they've been able to figure out, and examples of things that were unknown that they still haven't figured out, so that the public can see the difference between what technology brings to the analysis to inform lawmakers on what we need to do.
So July, like that's really soon. I mean, that's now. When did she say that?
You know, it's funny. I thought like, oh, this must be an old quote. No, she said it in June. That's really recent. Oh, so I'm a little surprised to hear that. But fast. Apparently, as of a few weeks ago, she was still thinking this was going to happen in July.
Oh, okay.
Now, just as a counterpoint, Representative Jim Himes, when asked about Gillibrand's upcoming Senate UAP hearing, said, quote, senators need to get briefed by ARROW and then move on. There's just way too much energy, and there's no there. I got an extensive briefing 3 or 4 weeks ago by ARROW, and I mean, it just pains me to say, because there's thousands of people out there who wake up in the morning desperate for there to be evidence of alien life, but there is none. They looked at every single compartmented program, and yeah, there was a program here or there that was set up in the event that we found something, but there's just nothing there. So before senators start talking about it, they need to get briefed. Now, are there 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 phenomena that we don't have the science around, that we don't, or some sighting or whatever? No, it's not perfection. But, you know, again, I wish we had aliens, but we don't.
Oh, man. 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Yeah, like, even the guy who believes ARROW's report seems to think there's like still some odd stuff going on.
Yeah. And what I love is, again, not a poli-sci major, but I think it is kind of widely understood in the US that of the two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate, the House tends to attract, shall we say, a less professional caliber of politician.
Sure. There's a lot more of them.
There's a lot more of them. It's a little easier to get in. So it's always kind of rich when somebody from the House of Representatives is like, these senators need to do their homework. Like, okay, buddy. Yeah. Senator Gillibrand hasn't been briefed by Arrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. But what I will say is the reason I included this quote is I think it's worthwhile. I don't want people to get the impression, because I tend to come to you with the UAP news, and the people who don't believe in UAP don't tend to talk about it. So there isn't really anything to say. Like, hey, how does Senator X feel about UFOs? No idea. They've never said anything on the topic. It's not fun to talk about. But I do think there is definitely, this is still the kind of traditional perception, right? We've talked before about how the military spent 70 years stigmatizing this topic incredibly effectively. And so I think people are primed to believe there's nothing to see here explanation from the military. So when Arrow puts out a report saying, we went and talked to everybody and there's nothing there, and they take Congress people into a skiff and brief them for an hour and read them the historical report, which, if you're not paying attention, looks good on the surface. It looks like, oh yeah, there was program A and program B and program C, and this one didn't find anything, and this one didn't find anything, and this one didn't find anything. And oh, also there was this weird program Kona Blue that they tried to set up in case there was a crasher table, but nothing ever came of it. So don't worry about it. Like, I think it's understandable that if this isn't your field of interest and you haven't met with any of the whistleblowers, you might be inclined to take this at face value. I don't fault Jim Himes and other dudes like him for thinking there's nothing going on here. As frustrating as it is to hear. But yeah, I love that even with that, even as the guy who's prepared to accept Arrow's thing, he's still like, yeah, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. You can almost hear the gears turning, like 2 isn't enough. There's more than that. Well, 3 isn't, maybe 5.
5. That sounds right.
That sounds right. Now, here's where it gets great. I love it when Congress gets catty with each other. Representative Jared Moskowitz, part of the UAP caucus, was asked about Himes' statement. And he said, what do you think, Arrow is going to walk in and be like, yeah, it's true?
Yep.
He says, I mean, we know that there are UAPs. And we know that there are UAPs they can't explain. Why can't they explain them? So, look, I don't do this deep state nonsense, but no, there is definitely a concerted effort by our government to keep information from us. When the stealth helicopters came out of Area 51 to go kill Osama bin Laden, nobody knew those helicopters existed, okay? And the only reason we know they exist today is because one of them crashed.
That is crazy to me that members of Congress don't even know about, like, some of the new stealth craft until they crash. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Now, Moskowitz's whole vibe here is my favorite because it reminds me of a story from my camp days. And forgive me if I've told this story before, but I put the quote in here and Chuck didn't recognize it. So, long story short, I was a counselor at camp, and the senior counselors would get up every night and do announcements at dinner. And they would do fake announcements. It'd be like, the Ferris wheel is closed for maintenance, and the ice cream social for the counselors will happen tonight after the kids are asleep. Like, obviously fake things. And all the kids predicted to be like, oh, there's a Ferris wheel. Oh, you guys get ice cream. And my buddy had this kid at his table who he described looking around the table with this look of dismay as he realizes the level of intelligence of his peers. He looked at all of his friends with utter contempt dripping out of his voice. He said, you guys, they're lying to you.
Yep. We all have to have that friend.
I think that's Moskowitz right now. Jim, they're lying to you.
Exactly.
All right. Back to Representative Tim Burchett. He mentioned that David Grush's famous list of cooperative and hostile witnesses, which was something he mentioned during his testimony to Congress, He said, that list will be part of the next hearing. Some of those folks said, I'm afraid to give out too many names because, as you know, what happened last time was we had like 12 people who were coming in, and we ended up with 3 because we had some people that were scared.
Yeah. I want to see them grilling uncooperative witnesses, but I also think there may not, like, they're uncooperative. It may just be entertainment. And
yeah, I have no idea. It would be really interesting. To be honest with you, I don't know what an uncooperative witness is. I imagine it in terms of court terms, like if you had a witness who wouldn't cooperate. But I think at that point, it's like the judge holds you in contempt. I don't know what it means to have an uncooperative witness in Congress. I assume
did they just plead the fifth or whatever?
Here are people who will publicly affirm what I am telling you. And here are people who know the truth and will lie to you. But I don't actually know what he means by that. So, yeah, I don't know. But Burchett says that list will be part of the next hearing.
So GPT says refusing to appear, refusing to answer question, providing evasive or incomplete answers, refusing to provide documents. And they have their methodologies, subpoenas, contempt of Congress, referrals to prosecution. But yeah.
Representative Jared Moskowitz, again, when asked about a public UAP hearing, was a little bit pessimistic about it. He said, I mean, look, my Republican colleagues have been pushing the speaker on this. They've told me we're going to get a select UAP committee, and I signed that letter, and it didn't happen. I think right now it looks like it's done.
Like done? Like no more ever? Or
no, I think he just means it won't happen before the election. We were joking around before, but like the election is sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I don't think very many people are willing to like use up what little political capital they have left on UAP right now.
Yeah. Is this also a Senate or Congress election time? I don't remember the schedule.
Yes, I believe they all happen on presidential election years, and then
I thought one was 6 years.
I might be wrong.
I don't know.
But even if it was just the president, that alone sucks all the air out of the room. You know, like nobody wants to distract from the president's agenda. You know, if you're a Democrat and you put up an embarrassing bill, it could have an effect on the election. You know, so
yeah. GPT says, yes, it is an election year for both Congress and Senate this year.
Cool. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, when asked about Gillibrand's upcoming Senate UAP hearing, said, yeah, it's likely. We just need a couple of months to prepare for it. I will say this. I've been very frustrated because I feel like, especially with the work we've done, we really haven't had a lot of conversations with the Senate, and we're completely open to that. Actually, Tim mentioned this last week, and as our chairman of the UAP caucus, he's going to be working on helping to facilitate the next hearing in the House Oversight Committee, which I think will be on USOs and UAPs.
A couple of months, huh? Also, USOs are, that's submerged
objects.
Okay. All right. Water aliens.
Yep. Now, quick teaser here. We are going to be doing an episode soon on Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who has talked about USOs.
Okay, cool.
Tim Burchett, again, when asked about the schedule for a possible House UAP hearing, said, yeah, something like the fall after the House recess. Luna and I have been talking about it, trying to get a good date.
Okay. When is recess?
So I had to go look this up. They're off for a good part of July. They're off for the week of 4th of July. Then they're back for a week. Then they're off for another week. And then they're off for the entirety of August.
Oh, nice. Okay. Great.
And then all of October and about half of November.
I need to become a congressperson. This sounds great.
Right? Oh, man. All right. Final quote here. Representative Glenn Grothman, who chaired the hearing with David Grush, was asked about a public UAP hearing. He said, I don't think it's going to be July. I think there'll be a next hearing, but we'll see. Maybe September or after the election.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. And September, that would be between the two big recesses. That seems tough.
So if I understand it right, you can't really make plans for after the election because that is technically a new Congress. Okay. So September is kind of your last chance to get anything done. But I might be wrong.
Yeah. GPT mentioned that all of the seats in the House are up for re-election, and 1/3 of the seats in the Senate. I actually like this. Senate has a 6-year time period, or senators serve 6 years, and they're all staggered. So 1/3 of the seats come up at any given time.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. So that's it. That's the congressional news update. You can see why I was kind of holding off. Like, even here with, a month or two of news built up there, there's not a whole lot to say. Like, yeah, they're working on the NDAA, and maybe there will be some UAP stuff in that. Hard to say yet. They've been talking about having a public hearing. We'll see. Yeah.
I mean, we still managed to squeak an hour out of this.
We did. It wasn't a bad show. It's just, I always get a little hesitant about doing a news show where there isn't like a big exciting takeaway. But this is part of the thing of how spoiled I've been, especially in the last year. Yeah. Like before 2017, we would get a single morsel. Like Obama would appear on TV and make a joke about UFOs, and it would sustain the whole UFO community for a year. Like, that was, oh my God, a president acknowledged the word UFO. Holy cow. A new book would come out, and it would be all anyone could talk about. And now, like, there's stuff dropping. We got documentaries. We got new books. Lou Elizondo's book is going to be out at the end of August. We're obviously going to have to talk about that. James Fox has a new documentary he's been teasing, which is apparently also dropping at the end of summer. We've got the election happening. Who knows what's going to happen in Congress after the election? There's so much stuff that when we get a slow period, even the slow periods have way more activity than we used to get. So I try to remind myself that I'm just spoiled, right? Like, we've been treated very well by the pace of change. It's a very exciting time. And here we are, a slightly slower week. We only had an hour of congressional UFO quotes.
Right. And just remember, if not this year, and if not next year, maybe the following.
Dagnabbit.
Dagnabbit.
We gotta get
my coworkers are going to be so confused. Like,
all right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our social media accounts.
And wait, where did the outro go? Feel free to email us. Yeah, right. Feel free to email us at Scott or Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com. You already said the line about Patreon, so I'm going to skip that one.
I didn't, but okay.
I thought you did. All right. I don't know. What's going on.
Website. You can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime. And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs, so she doesn't have to.